Hi, everyone. I am Michael Hinkson, and I also happen to be your host on Unstoppable Mindset. Dual personality when I'm not a host and when I am a host? Anyway, I really want to welcome you all to Unstoppable Mindset again today. We are fortunate to have an interesting guest. You know, we have all sorts of different kinds of people who come on the podcast, and I never know who we might encounter from day to day, but today we get to chat with Marie P. Anderson. I'm just going to call her Marie until she yells at me. But Marie is a model agent. She's an author. She's a speaker, and she does other sorts of things. And I will tell you one of the things, although most of you probably wouldn't know it, is that she launched the career of the model Cindy Crawford. And I'm sure we'll hear about that as we go forward. And I'm sure other people as well. But be that as it may, Marie, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. I'm really glad that we have the chance finally to talk. We've been working at this for a while, haven't we?
Yes, we have. It's my pleasure, Michael. It's been several months, and I appreciate your patience with my crazy schedule. And finally, we get together today.
Yeah, we get to do it. Well, you know, it's getting down toward Christmas, and when we record this, although this will go out later than that, but the bottom line is things slow down, maybe at least some. But I'm glad you're here. I'm glad we were able to do this. Well, tell us a little about kind of maybe the early Marie growing up and all that, because I know you started dealing with fashion early, but just tell us all about you growing up and about the world then.
Well, it was kind of a unique upbringing. My father was a rocket scientist at NASA during the Apollo moon program. So I literally grew up with rockets until the presidents changed, and then the Apollo moon program was shut down, and that goes on to a whole nother history lesson.
Yeah.
But my mother, before she had met my father before the war, had been a model in New York. She wasn't a top model. She was just kind of a freelance doing things here and there. So me as a child, she introduced me to modeling. She was a fundraiser producer, and she would put together fashion shows, and I would be one of her non-paid models that would walk down the runway. And that's how I got bit by the fashion bug, was being introduced by my mother to fashion.
So what did you do? How did you get bit by the bug, and what did you do?
Well, as soon as I started putting on fun clothes that didn't belong to me, I was like, oh, well, this is exciting. So that's really where it started. And she taught me how to sew, how to knit, how to make jewelry. She gave me a little loom. I was weaving my own fabrics. Like, she taught me all sorts of very tactile lessons of how I could use my creativity to express myself with my dolls. At the time, I was producing my own runway shows in my bedroom with all of my Barbies. And I only had one guy. There's only one Ken. I wasn't really interested in the Ken dolls, so he just sat in the audience.
Now this was
so that was like 6 or 7 years old.
This was in New York?
No, sir. That was in Cocoa Beach, Florida.
In Cocoa Beach, okay.
Yeah. My dad worked at NASA at the Cape Kennedy.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So did you ever experience FAO Schwartz in New York at Christmas time and the whole Barbie Center there?
No, I did not.
It's a pretty amazing place. I Christmas shopped there occasionally when I happened to be on the East Coast before we moved there. When I was back dealing with sales and so on. And I love to go to FAO Schwartz because they did have personal shoppers that helped. And I never did visit the Barbie room. There was no room to go into that place anyway. It was totally crowded, but they had this whole big room that was just all Barbie-ish.
Yeah, I'm feeling very deprived of that experience.
Well, yeah, I don't know whether there's anything similar to that anymore or not, since FAO Schwartz has basically gone away.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very sad. Oh well.
You can live in my dreams.
There you are, see? And you can make it as large a room as you want.
Exactly.
So you designed your own fashions then, primarily for your dolls early on?
Yes. Yes. And I had a line of clothing that was called by my nickname, and my nickname was Minnie, Minnie. My middle name is Philomen, so that's how I acquired the nickname of Minnie.
Okay.
So that's how my clothing line, and I actually had a little label too to put inside. The label was almost as big as the garments, but that's how it all started there in Cocoa Beach, Florida.
Wow. So you did that while you were going to school, and so you had agendas and all that. So how did school interfere with all the fashion design that you were doing?
Well, actually, it didn't really interfere at all in the sense that, I could always rush home and work on all my projects. It took me through early childhood and into my teens. And I had decided early on I wanted to become a clothing designer. That was my ultimate goal. I was making my own clothes as a teen, my girlfriend's clothes. I was completely obsessed with that goal in mind. And I didn't have any money, and I was married as a 16-year-old. So I had to apply to colleges for scholarships. And so as a result of the applications, I went through all sorts of rejections. And then I finally got an acceptance to a school in Atlanta. And I had the letter. I ran in to tell my sewing home ec teacher that I had finally gotten a scholarship to design clothes. And she looked at me holding the letter as if I was pathetic. And she said, "Marie, you'll never be a designer. You don't have any talent." So that was the end
don't you love support?
Of course, I was completely devastated at the time, but maybe she did me a favor. I don't know, but she certainly redirected me into another area of the business, which would then eventually, a couple of years later, I would move to Chicago, work for a top fashion photographer. And in between there, I was still modeling as well. But then working for the fashion photographer, Stan Melanowski, that would evolve into my becoming an agent. And so essentially for the past 40 years, that's what I've been doing, is scouting, developing, and managing fashion models.
Now, I gather that you were homeless for a while?
Yes, sir, I was. I am a survivor of domestic violence. In my senior year of high school, I decided finally in December of 1976 that I was tired of being beaten and just enduring the trauma of a teen husband. And so I walked out. I decided I would rather be homeless than live with his violence. And so from January 1976 to June of 1976, I was homeless and living on food stamps.
Wow. And where were your
But
parents?
I still graduated high school.
Well, there you go. Where were your parents through all that?
Well, they were in Virginia because I had been married. I was considered a legal adult. And so I didn't have to go back to Virginia because my father had lost his job when they closed the Apollo Moon program. I think it was 1973.
Right.
And so we had moved to Virginia, and then I got married and moved back down to Cocoa Beach when I was 16.
So what job did your dad go into after Apollo shut down?
The only job he could, and that was being a professor of environmental science in a small community college called Wytheville Community College, deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains.
Right. Quite a change from rocket science.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he still got to use his knowledge, which, counted for something, I guess.
Yeah. He had grown up in Virginia, so essentially he was just going home. I didn't appreciate the culture shock at all. I had to get married to get out of there.
Well, so you did you go to college?
No, to clarify, I went to night school.
Okay.
And I studied film production at Columbia College in Chicago
Ah.
when I was running elite model management in Chicago in the 80s, because I decided being a being a film producer was going to be my next phase, getting out of the fashion business because I saw so much abuse in the fashion business.
Mm.
I thought, okay, I'm too sensitive. I just need to get away from the abuse, and the film industry will be much better.
Right. Uh-huh. And how did that work out for you?
Not right at all.
Right. Yeah.
So that
Unfortunately,
was
I
the
can
only college,
imagine.
really.
Go ahead.
I never went to traditional college
Right.
like most people.
And I can imagine in the film industry, just at least from all that I've seen, there is its share of abuse as well, and a lack of respect a lot of times.
Yes, hence the Me Too movement that evolved, thankfully.
Yeah.
Yes, I was very naive in thinking it was going to be better there.
Well, but it was also probably to a large degree hidden, so would you have necessarily
Yes,
really known?
yes.
Yeah. But you ended up not going into the film industry and just continued to be an agent and ran Elite Model and whatever else you did.
Well, there was a bit of a hiccup there. So I either owned or ran top agencies through the 80s and the 90s and into the early 2000s. And I had owned my own agency called ARIA, Model and Talent Management, in Chicago for 13 years. And then we got an offer that we couldn't refuse from Ford Models in New York. So we sold ARIA to Ford in 2003. And then I moved to Los Angeles to pursue that 20-year goal of being a film producer. I was 1 year clean and sober. And I got to Los Angeles and realized I was in a deeper, more toxic situation than I had left. So I moved away a year later so that I could maintain my sobriety, because I was living and working in West Hollywood.
Ah, yes, and there certainly were a lot of free-flowing spirits, if you will, around Hollywood and
Yes.
LA and all that. Where did you move to?
I moved to Scottsdale for 3 years.
Okay.
And that was, and I'm being sarcastic, that was a fun experience. I arrived in Scottsdale as a millionaire from the sale of Ford, and I invested in real estate. And then in 2008, the housing collapsed. And so I lost everything in the housing collapse. And there was nothing left in Scottsdale. And I had a couple of my models asking me to move back to Chicago. So that's what I did. So in 2008 until 3 years ago, I was living back in Chicago, managing models back in the agency business again.
What kind of effect did September 11th have on all that you did in the whole modeling world? Did it really have a significant impact on all that?
Yes, the September 11th on all of us had such a devastating effect. As you know, the fashion industry in America, the heart is New York City.
Right.
And so just the ripple effect of the devastation of the loss, it really brought things to a halt for a very long time. But New York being New York, putting the scraps together and slowly but surely recreated an industry, only for then COVID to come in
Yeah.
and AI to come in. So we're in a whole nother era. And I don't want to sound like Debbie Downer. It's just that is reality.
Yeah.
That is what we had to contend with, everybody.
Well, and AI continues to be an issue that gets discussed quite often. And I'm sure that there are any number of people who may not have the appropriate ethics who try to cut corners and use AI to create characters and people and so on. as opposed to going out and truly hiring models and doing what it is that you do.
Yeah, slowly but surely we are being replaced. Agents are being replaced, models are being replaced, hair, makeup, wardrobe stylists, fashion producers. Our business is morphing into something we've never known before.
Where do you think it's all headed?
You know what, Michael? I wish I could say I knew, but after 40 years, I've never been in this situation where AI and social media has
Yeah.
brought in an oversaturation of models. So the traditional kind of template for the modeling industry has kind of faded into the sunset, and there's a whole new wild, wild west that we're still trying to navigate.
Yeah, it certainly is a challenge, and I can appreciate that. I don't obviously personally deal with pictures a whole lot, but I understand it intellectually, and I hear about it all the time, and it is pretty scary. I'm not sure how anyone will ever truly be able to place governors on it, but that's also happened with the internet, and there's been some levels of control, but still, there are just so many different things and so many new things that come out almost daily that it must make it a really scary situation for all of you.
It is. It is very scary for us, Michael.
Yeah. And who knows where it's going to go.
But the
Well,
important thing is, as you know, just in life, you have to pivot.
yep.
You have to figure out where you can fit in with the a new set of circumstances.
Yeah, and I think that no matter what AI does, it isn't going to ultimately replace the person. So I think it's a process, and we have to go through it. But
Yeah.
I really do think that AI isn't going to be able to totally replace the person, and that's something that people are going to have to learn to recognize somewhere along the line.
We have souls. It does not.
Yep, yep, absolutely. And in photographs and in pictures, I think a lot of times those souls come through, and you're just not going to totally get it with AI.
Exactly. They can create a beautiful photograph, but in the eyes, it doesn't look anything like a human's eye.
Yeah, which is, I think, the whole issue. Well, all the early experiences that you had, how's that helping to prepare you for kind of the future and where the industry is going and everything else that's happening?
Well, for me, my life started very unusual, as I mentioned when we first began. I was incubated in the womb of my mother, who was a schizophrenic. And so, being in, if you believe in more spiritual things, I popped out being a little warrior, learning that I had to survive aside from her violence and aside from other inappropriate things that were happening to me and my body as a little person.
Yeah.
So the reality is, I think my mother's womb prepared me for the rest of my life that was always going to be turbulent. And I think it's offered very interesting stories to talk about.
How so, for example?
Surviving a violent schizophrenic mother, surviving a father who is a workaholic who put men on the moon,
Yeah.
Surviving sexual abuse as a child, surviving verbal and physical abuse. Like it wasn't a happy childhood at all. But thank God for my Barbies and designing clothes and creating fashion shows, because that was my sanity.
Well, it's interesting. One of the questions that comes to mind is that women who challenge the norm, if you will, tend to be considered difficult. What have you learned about dealing with power and going through that kind of thing?
Well, it started off with my teachers. They used to think I was difficult. I was always getting in trouble for disrupting the class, bad conduct, because I didn't know at the time, but I had ADHD and a little kid suffering from traumatic experiences trying to find their way in a classroom where they were just boring with dyslexia. It just, nothing was fun in school. And so that just really prepared me to be a disruptor, I guess, not intentionally. But yes, I've always been considered difficult, and especially in the fashion business, when I've been trying to speak out and trying to create safer work environments, people would always say, Marie, it's just part of the business. It's the way it's done. It's not that big of a deal. It's just rape. So what? It's
It's primarily men. It's primarily men who say that, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes,
Anyway,
sir.
go ahead.
There's a few women out there. I experienced sexual assault by a female in Rome when I was working for Stan Malinowski when I was 20. And that kind of gave me an interesting introduction to the true haute couture world of dysfunction junction. But for me, I believe that for whatever bad experience came my way, if I could receive that bad experience and intercept it so nobody else had to have that experience, then I take it proudly.
Well, but you also learned how to move on and let all of those kinds of experiences help you enhance and become stronger.
Exactly. Yes, sir.
And I think that's really a significant part of all of it. And it's something all too few of us really learn to do and learn to do well. We become just so fearful. And I'm not going to say that you're not fearful, but by the same token, you learn to control all of that, which is very important. And you learn to move beyond it. And as you said earlier, pivot.
Indeed. What helped me a great deal is becoming clean and sober about 23 years ago. And then also learning martial arts starting in 1985. So I've been trying to continuously learn to live a healthier life and trying to find a way that would be effective for me and not being abusive towards other people, like finding a peace. And I'm still working on that. Happiness is elusive, so I'm just focused on peace. I'm trying to learn stoicism.
What got you into martial arts?
Well, actually, I had been experiencing so much sexual impropriety from just being a little toddler to into my 20s. And so I just was tired of feeling like a victim. So I started boxing at Chicago Fitness Center, and I found out that I was not a natural athlete. And boxing, you have to be very fast, which I'm not. So at Chicago Fitness Center, they also had Shidokan martial arts. And I thought, okay, so maybe if I can include other parts of my body, maybe I can kind of catch up with the other athletes. So that's how it started.
Well, and martial arts and karate and so on are, to a large degree, also mindset. It's not just the physical part of it.
You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, and so that had to help.
My Shihan, Eddie Yoshimura, who owns Chicago Fitness Center, who is president of the Shidokan USA organization, he was truly a blessing. And I'll just give you one quick example. You talk about mindset, Michael. Years I had been training, and there was a international competition, and he had assumed that I was going to compete, and I had concluded I wasn't going to compete because I was so busy with my modeling agency and I hadn't trained to compete, although I had competed in other tournaments. And so he came to me like a week before the competition and he said, "So you're fighting this weekend, right?" I said, "No, sir, I'm not going to fight. I'm not prepared." And he said, "Well, I'm just going to ask you one question. Would you rather do it and know you at least tried, than not try and know and knew that you lost.
Good
I was like,
point.
ah. So I did compete and I did win.
I'm still a fan of Yoda. Do or do not. There is no try.
Right.
But that's cool that you did win, and so you've been doing it ever since. And how far have you progressed in karate?
I am a second degree black belt in Shidokan karate, and then I have various rankings in other martial arts.
Mm.
But I'm not, as I mentioned before, I'm not a natural athlete. So I'm really more there in spirit and in intention.
But it clearly is working for you.
Yes, sir, it is. And then by my learning essentially self-defense and how to be proactive to not put myself into harmful situations, with learning that, then Shihan Eddie also taught me how to teach women self-defense as well. So he incorporated me for years in teaching all sorts of people, including people in wheelchairs, how to do martial arts.
Uh-huh.
He taught me a great deal, and I'm still part of the Shidokan organization.
And so how has that, or has it reshaped you and your whole mindset? It certainly has contributed to what I've been hearing, but has it caused a great shift or reshaping of your whole outlook?
Yes, martial arts created a whole new outlook, because instead of going at it in every situation thinking I'm a victim, now I think of it as I'm a warrior. So when situations present themselves, for example, I was in Florence, Italy in 2006, and there was an attempted mugging by two what I'll call gypsies. I don't know how to describe them otherwise. They came at me from behind. And as a result of my training with martial arts and paying attention to my environment, not only did I prevent them from mugging me, I scared them so much with my voice screaming at them. They both jumped back and then ran into separate directions away from each other.
Wow.
So yes, my attitude is very different after martial arts training.
Certainly being put in a position where you had to defend yourself also had to help when you were teaching other people, because you could talk about personal experiences where you used it. That has to lend a lot of credibility.
Oh, and I want to tell you something super adorable. Like, I was so proud of myself. I get back from Florence, Italy, and I go to Shihan, so proud, telling him my story about how I had defended myself. And he looks at me, he goes, "What were you wearing?" I said, "I had my Prada backpack." And he said, "You were wearing a designer backpack and you're shocked that you were experiencing attempted mugging?" I said, "Well, I'm in the fashion business, and I was on the way to Milan to meet with a fashion agent, so of course I had to wear my Prada." He said, "Marie, you made yourself a target. So I can't compliment you on the fact you defended yourself. I'm going to reprimand you in the fact you put yourself in that situation." I was like, okay, whatever. So when I talk to the girls, I explain this kind of thing, that you don't just carry things on your body that invites an opportunity for people to take from you.
On the other hand, today, would you wear Prada if you were in the same situation?
No. Honest to God, I stopped wearing Prada backpacks a long time ago, and now I wear a worn Nike.
Okay.
But when I'm going to someplace nice, I'll put on my Coach backpack, which is a beautiful black leather backpack, but it doesn't advertise, expensive.
Yeah.
Like a Prada logo in Italy.
Yeah. Well, and of course that's part of the whole issue, is that ultimately it's a learning experience, and you have to figure out what to do to keep from being attacked or abused, while at the same time doing what you need to do for the job.
Absolutely.
So there's been a lot of abusiveness in the whole world of modeling. And you have been dealing with that for quite a while. You've been speaking out about it for a long time. What gave you the strength to do that, especially before people were recognizing that that was not a good thing to do? And I'm not sure that people have all necessarily recognized that even today, but still.
Well, they need to recognize it, or else I'll sit them down and give them a little seminar.
or karate will take over.
But to answer your question, this was even before martial arts, before I got clean and sober in 2004. Um, the quick version is my models. It's a completely different company now, but I worked for Elite Model Management. As we discussed before, I was the vice president of Elite in Chicago, and my female models were coming back from Europe telling me of sexual assaults and sexual harassment. And because I had experienced that myself, as I mentioned, teens into early 20s, I understood the significance of how that violates our bodies and then the side effects of that trauma or those traumas. And I was urging them to say something, and they forbid me to say anything because they didn't want to be blackballed in the business.
Yeah.
So hearing this, and then a couple of years would go by, I would be in Ibiza, Spain, and overhearing the two primary owners of the Elite Network defending themselves that they can sleep with 13 and 14-year-old women, that they're men and they have needs and they're not going to stop. So
Wow.
when I heard that they were so blatantly and arrogantly abusing people, I was like, this is ridiculous. So I quit Elite and I swore off the agency business. That was in late 1989. And I opened up a little company called Model Futures, which is essentially the kind of thing I'm doing now, which is just managing models. It's not booking models. And then after 2 years of doing that, an owner of a commercial agency, Mary Boncher, asked me to open up my own agency to essentially establish a different way of managing models. And that would be a safe environment where they got paid on time. They didn't have to worry about sexual harassment and so on. And so that's how Aria evolved in 1992. So I did try to speak with journalists in 1989 about the abuse in the business, and none of the journalists were interested in hearing anything that I had to say.
Yeah.
So I found what is now, I understand the term to be called making amends. Like when I opened up Aria, I could make amends for the things that I could not do with the girls that were being abused in Europe. Now, as an agent owning my own agency, I could do whatever I could to empower them with information and not place them with agencies that I knew that were abusive.
Where did the name Aria come from?
Isn't it a beautiful name? I love that
is.
name. Honestly, Michael, I was thinking about you back in the day when they had paper and ink. We used to have directories that were in alpha order. So I knew it had, because I wanted to have my agency be the first one in the list, like just logic business strategy. So I knew it had to start with A, and I loved everything Italian, designers and hairdressers, makeup artists. I just loved Italy's culture. And so I went into an Italian dictionary and I found the word aria, which actually also means solo opera. And I thought, well, that's a perfect example for me. This is my solo opera away from Elite.
Got it. Well, so you started your own agency. How did you learn to trust your own instincts and your own gut as opposed to all the typical things entrepreneurs face, numbers and noise and and all the other things that people are probably trying to tell you about how to run a business or not run a business. But you clearly went your own way. How did all that work out?
Well, it worked out spectacularly. The models, this is what is so amazing. One of my models that I scouted and developed back in, like, I would say 1996, when she was in high school. I would manage her for many years. She would get married, have children. And now just this week, she's coming back into my life for me to manage her career again. That's like, there's no higher validation for me in my soul is when girls that I've managed before through Aria come back to me in this era because they know they can trust me.
Is she famous?
And so she's, not famous like Cindy Crawford famous. She has, probably 15 covers of magazines. And when I was at Elite, I scouted and developed, I think, 10 additional Vogue cover models. Cindy's career excelled past everybody else's, but they all found ways to become successful in their own ways. Mm-hmm. But for me, at the risk of sounding cheesy, my experience with God was very early in life. And so I constantly put my trust in my God and knew that whatever was to come was what was my responsibility. So following my instincts, I knew opening up my agency, Aria, was part of the solution to offer alternative way of experiencing the business world as a model.
Faith is a part of your life, isn't it?
Yes, sir, 100%.
Tell me more about that. How did all that come about? I'm assuming it was an evolutionary sort of thing.
Well, I was christened as a Catholic, and I went to Catholic school. And although I didn't fit in very well into Catholic school because I was such a disruptor, I did not appreciate the rulers that we had to kneel on, or our knuckles being rapped, or the verbal abuse. I wasn't very appreciative of the nuns or our priest at the time. I thought that they were actually quite evil people. So for me, Catholicism wasn't my relationship with God. For me, it was just thinking of God as my protector very early on in life. Because by now I should have been dead on multiple occasions. I've had a lot of bad experiences that should have put me in under the ground, but God keeps protecting me, always providing for me.
And over time, has God taken a different position in your life, or still just protector?
I haven't really thought about it any differently than it's been the same experience since I was a child. If I ever go into self-doubt, I just remind myself that there's a higher power working, and I just need to trust in the process.
That's fair. Well, that's no problem. Well, so yeah, I think faith is a very important part of my life, and belief in God. So any atheists who are out there, I hope don't get too mad at me, but that's their choice.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's all about choice, and I think that's a very important thing to to deal with. But you clearly have progressed in so many different ways, and so what exactly are you? So what are you doing today? You're still running a modeling agency, or what?
No, I left my last job. My last job in Chicago, working in a booking agency, was Wilhelmina, Chicago, before they closed down. That was in 2017. I moved here, in 2022? just because I wanted to get away from there. The violence in Chicago was getting too much for me. I lived in River North, some of the most expensive real estate there. And between the violence and the cold, I was like, no, I need a calmer, peaceful
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
So that's why I came down to Florida, where then I could focus on writing more books and managing my fashion models. So I don't book them. I know it can be confusing, but I'm not an agency that has a license to book models. I'm a freelance model manager that then places my models with agencies who then book them and then give me a commission from the work of the models.
It's an interesting kind of position to be in. So presumably you're also in a position to be able to coach models and teach them and help them develop some of the same skills that we've been talking about here.
Yes, and I don't really advertise it a lot, but
Right.
on demand, so to speak, I do one-on-one coaching where people pay me by the hour for my insider knowledge.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. So what is, if I may, I'm just kind of curious being a guy, what is the male modeling industry as opposed to the modeling agency for, and the modeling world for women?
Well,
There,
it has gotten much, 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 much better. The modeling industry, not only for male models, but inclusivity, it's diversity. The industry, in a good way, has morphed greatly since I got into it in the 80s, where essentially once in a while you might see a male model, or once in a while you might see a model of color. But nowadays you see them everywhere. It's awesome.
do you think you've been a significant force in bringing a lot of that about because of all the things that you've done?
I'd like to think so, because as a scout, I choose models, and I'll give you a perfect example. It's a irritating story for me, but when I was in the 80s, when I ran Elite Chicago, I found this beautiful light-skinned African American girl from a modeling competition there, and I fell in love with her. I didn't care if she was shorter. 5'7" is shorter in the fashion
Mm-hmm.
business. And I told her I wanted to have her come be represented by our agency, but I needed to run her photos by my bookers back in Chicago. So I brought her pictures back to Chicago, and the fashion agents were so snotty. They're like, oh, she's so short. She's so commercial. No, we don't want her. I'm like, you guys, you don't understand. This is a special girl. No, we're not interested. Okay, so then I think, okay, well, maybe I can make her into an actress. She's that special. I go to the acting department, do the same thing. The acting department head says to me, Marie, we have enough blacks. And I said, no, 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 it's not about being black. It's about, this is a special person. I think she could evolve. No, Marie, you handle the fashion. I'll handle the acting.
Mm,
We're not interested. It was Halle Berry.
gosh. What happened after that?
Well, clearly she didn't need us.
Yeah.
She did her own, like, that's a perfect example of somebody who just keeps going after what they want and not getting discouraged. But that's the kind of frustration I would have as an agent. And even when I started Cindy Crawford, people were like, oh, now she's got that ugly beauty mark. Oh, she's got the dark circles underneath her eyes. Oh, she needs to lose weight. And I said, I don't care. I know what is special beauty, and that is a girl that's going to make us some money, because she was highly intelligent, hardworking, committed to the process, and she did everything that she's accomplished. Yes, agents have assisted the way, but she's the one that showed up and did the work.
Yeah. Do you still see much of her or interact with her?
No, we've exchanged notes, old school handwritten notes over the years, but nothing in person.
Good for you. Handwritten notes. There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, she had written a book, written and published a book through Rizzoli called Becoming Cindy. And in that book, I think this goes back maybe 10 years. I don't remember. Anyway, Becoming Cindy. And in that book, she acknowledges me for being the one that started her career. And so I wrote her a thank you note for acknowledging me. And then she wrote me a note back saying that talking about our journey together was a sincere pleasure. That's the kind of woman she is. She's always been a class act.
That's cool. You know, people who don't lose their perspective when they get famous or whatever, whoever they are, whatever they do.
Definitely a good Midwestern girl.
There you are, see? And it's kind of important. Well, you used to really have a great fondness for sugar. And how is your life? Well, how do I ask this question? You describe sugar as your oldest coping mechanism, but how do you show compassion for that when you're obviously not as concerned about sugar as you used to be?
So sugar was my first addiction as a 6-year-old to keep me sane with all the insanity in my house and outside of my house. Then I started smoking cigarettes as a 10-year-old, started drinking as a 10-year-old, started drugs as a 13-year-old. So those were all like self-soothing mechanisms. And then when I got clean and sober in 2004, I walked away from cigarettes, alcohol, and recreational drugs all at the same time. But sugar hung with me like a barnacle on the side of the boat. And it's still something that I struggle with on a daily basis. But as of right now, I have 3 months of being abstinent from sugar binging. But it is a struggle. It's something that I have to contend with on a daily basis, still dealing with my demons because they're still there.
Yeah, well, and hopefully over time you'll find that you can become stronger with that too. I know that over the years I gained a fair amount of weight, and a lot of it had to do with fatty foods. Not so much sugar. I've never been like a soft drink drinker, but I ate wrong foods, and years ago decided to change that, and I've actually lost about 80 pounds and am very happy with it. So yeah, it's kind of exciting actually. Yeah, so that's worked out pretty well, and now I work at making sure that weight doesn't come back. And I won't say it's a struggle, but it is something that I monitor so that it won't happen.
Yeah.
But that's a discipline more than anything else.
Yes. A discipline I'm still learning.
Well, we all work at those kinds of things. Well, so, you know, you are obviously a person who has had a lot of life experiences and so on. What would you tell someone who wants to start out in the modeling industry today?
What would I tell somebody who wanted to start in the modeling industry today?
What kind of advice would you want to pass along?
That's a great question. I'm trying to condense it because I'm writing my 3rd edition of my book, and it's going to be 20 chapters. That's how much information I've got to share with people. But I would say probably my most important little nugget to share with them is to not trust people right away. That trust is something that should be earned. And no matter how fancy the logo is on the agency door or how many followers the agency has on Instagram, that they have to truly maintain their own power. Don't give it up when they walk in the door of the agency and go into like victim mode, like, oh no, are they going to take me? They have to feel that they are enough and to trust in themselves first.
Yeah. Well, and in the book that I wrote and we published last year, Live Like a Guide Dog, I talk about the fact that dogs don't trust automatically. I think dogs do love unconditionally, but they don't trust automatically. But the difference between dogs and most people is that dogs are at least open to trust, unless something has just totally traumatized them. But mostly that doesn't happen. So dogs are open to trust. And when you develop the trusting relationship, it is a two-way street and it is a two-way relationship. But I hear what you're saying, and I think the only thing I would add is at least be open to trust. And if somebody earns your trust and they earn your trust, that's great. But be open to the concept.
Agreed, 100%.
Well, so you have obviously worked at your own companies and so on. What kind of advice would you give to a person starting out as an entrepreneur, starting their own company? And what kind of advice would you give them to help them kind of make the right kinds of decisions along the way?
Well, my best advice I would give a new entrepreneur is don't focus only on the fun and the creativity, that they absolutely have to learn how to manage a business. Like money management, money coming in, money going out. It needs to be monitored 100% of the time. It's not necessarily fun, but it is absolutely critical to build a business.
How so?
Well, I'll give you a quick example of how oblivious I was to money back when we opened up Aria. My business partner, Mary, was really the business brains. And we were moving into our new space. And I wanted to have these custom made benches for the models room. We had a room where the models could go and hang out in between castings. And we wanted them to have a space that was just theirs. And so I wanted to have these custom made benches made around the perimeter of this circular room. And she said, oh, okay, why don't you get some quotes and then come back to me? I got quotes and the lowest one was $10,000. And so I said, okay, so this is the lowest one. Let's go with this one. And she said, okay, let me just ask you a question. Can we relocate that custom made bench when we expand to our bigger space? And I said, no. So she said, okay, so that's a waste of $10,000.
Yeah.
And I said, good point. Never mind. We'll get folding chairs. So you really, really have to understand every choice with the money. Oh, that was another one of my, or still is, another one of my addictions was compulsive spending. And so I've been in recovery because of the housing collapse in 2008. That's when I discovered I was also a compulsive spender. Yeah. So I didn't understand that my emotions were attached to spending money.
What made you discover that, or how did you discover that that was the case?
Well, going from a millionaire to a pauper in 2 weeks.
Got it.
Living in Scottsdale, Arizona.
That would do it. Yeah, I know what you're saying. My wife's always said that she was no good with math. In fact, her basic philosophy of life was that math lies. She could perform the same math problem, and if she was trying to do it on her own or with pencil and paper, she didn't necessarily always get the same answer every time. So she said math lies. But at the same time, she understood the basic principles and managed our money. And there were times that we had a fair amount of debt, and she worked to bring it all down and did. For me, it's a whole lot easier now because, for example, with credit card charges, I just have set up all of our cards so that when a bill comes due, the whole bill gets paid off. I don't make partial payments because that's just earning a whole lot more money for the bank and not for me.
Absolutely.
And not owing anything on cards means that all that we're paying for are the current charges, and a lot of that, of course, being a speaker, is travel and other things like that. So it works out pretty well. But but she really kept tabs on all that, and I learned a lot.
We all need a wife.
Well, I learned a lot from that, and she passed away in November of 2022. But I learned a lot that has helped to be able to keep going. I miss her. we were married 40 years, but as I point out to everyone, she's up there monitoring me from somewhere, and if I misbehave, I'm going to hear about it, so I got to be a good kid.
I love that.
Otherwise, I'll get in trouble. So, I got to do that. So, it works out. But I think that you're right. Everybody needs a good wife. The fact of the matter is that there are so many things that we have to learn. And if you're going to take on the job of starting a company or being very much involved as an entrepreneur in any kind of organization, the entrepreneurial spirit does mean that you have to make choices and you have to be the one to do it. Sometimes you may delegate other things to people, but you still are the one who's in charge, and you have to recognize that right off the bat.
They are the CEO and CFO and treasurer. They are the everything of their company.
Right.
And they have to accept that responsibility or don't get into owning their own business.
Yeah. And you obviously figured that out along the way.
Yes, I did. I was very blessed with a lot of mentors and very painful financial losses, which were great lessons.
Yeah. So that worked out. Well, I really agree with what you're saying, and I'm glad that you have had the strength to stick with it and will continue to stick with it, and that's cool. So I want to thank you for being here once again. If people want to reach out to you for whatever reason, how might they do that?
They can send me an email, mariepandersonagent@gmail.com. mariepandersonagent@gmail.com.
Okay.
And P.S. and by the way, I appreciated you including my P in my Marie P. Anderson, Michael. Because there's a lot of Marie Andersons in the world. Who would have thought?
I was actually, and I forgot I was going to ask you, why do you insist on the P being there? And it makes perfect sense when you say that.
Yeah, that's why, to separate me from all the other lovely Marie Andersons in the world.
I learned when I was at a hotel getting a Marriott rewards number put into my record, that Marriott has 4 Michael Hinksons. I would never have thought.
Wow, that's amazing.
Scary.
But are you number one? I would fight for being number one.
Well, I agree. Well, my middle initial is B, so maybe that helps.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Michael. I had such a great time talking with you.
Well, this has been fun, and I hope people will reach out to you, so please do that. And for all of you out there, I'd love to hear your thoughts about today's episode. Please feel free to email me, Michael H.I. at accessibe.com. And wherever you're listening, watching, or whatever, please give us a 5-star rating. But even more important than just the rating, please give us a review. I know Marie would love to hear and see your thoughts, so please give us a review about the podcast. And of course, we all hope that it will be a great review. But I'd love to get your thoughts and in any way that you see fit to pass them along. And as I told Marie, and I'll tell all of you, if any of you know of anyone who you think ought to be a guest on Unstoppable Mindset, we'd love to hear from you. I believe everyone has a story to tell, so we're always looking for more people to meet and get to know, like we got to really chat with Marie today. So once again, though, Marie, this has been absolutely super, and I'm glad that you and I got a chance to do this. We'll have to do it again sometime, but thank you for being on.
My pleasure. Take care.
If you're ready to go deeper into the ideas that shape how we see ourselves and others, I have a free gift for you. Head over to michaelhinkson.com and download my free ebook, Blinded by Fear. Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep choosing to live with an unstoppable mindset.